So once we've got all this data in the system, it's important that it's standardized, because the valuer, if they're doing a valuation, they can't have a property manager creating a lease with just certain terms and conditions and another property manager doing something completely different, because their software can't handle that. So here comes along the new term that was created mainly through Ethereum called the smart contract. So traditionally, a lease I would call a dumb contract. A lease has a lot of terms and conditions. They're very complex. Things like break clauses, termination clauses, outgoings, recoveries, rent reviews, options. But it's dumb because it's sitting in a filing cabinet or a database, but nothing actually triggers or ensures there is actually compliance with all the rules that were set out in the lease. So this is where a smart contract comes in. A smart contract has three elements to it. The first is standardization. If you're going to have a lease, have standard structures, standard ways of capturing terms. And we call that, you would have heard the term tokenization. So tokenization is basically coming up with a standard or a standard template that everyone agrees to and shares. And the whole objective of the smart contract is everyone in the network actually has access to that template. And if the template's changed, if you add a new field to the lease, everyone will have to agree to that new field being added. But the advantage of that is the data can now be shared, and it's now agreed in terms of structure. The second part to a smart contract is the rules. As I said, there's a lot of rules behind a lease. So you can actually build into the system auto-compliance with these rules and allow participants to only do certain things. You may say you can't terminate a lease within 60 days of the lease expiring, or only certain people can action a termination. This gets all programmed, because a smart contract is programmable logic, into the smart contract, instead of having to manually make sure that they're complying with that lease all the time. And the third component is permissions. Whoever creates the data owns the data and makes a decision as to who in the network can see that data, can action on that data, and if they want, revoke who has access to that data. So thinking about the combination of a blockchain forming a distributed ledger and then introducing smart contracts, it creates a whole lot of real-world opportunities. And I like to think about it in terms of three categories. The first is if you've got a simple inter-organizational workflow, so you may have multiple departments within your organization, and you do have trusted participants, but you want to use a smart contract and a blockchain for that exchange of workflow, that's the simplest use case of a distributed ledger. The more powerful one, and the one that adds most value, is around inter-organizational or industry-wide workflows. If you can get all the participants within an ecosystem or within an industry to connect to this single distributed ledger, it creates opportunities to have workflows between what would normally be untrusted participants, because they may not trust each other, but they do trust the actual blockchain itself. They trust the data that's held within it. The third area is track and trace. There's a lot of use cases already out there. The whole tracking or provenance from paddock to plate. How do you get all the supply chain, and every time there's an injection, something moves from the farm to the truck to the ship to the retailer, being able to track the provenance of that product through the process. The advantage of a distributed ledger is all those participants within those ecosystems have equal access to be able to contribute to this provenance. The fourth area, you would have heard of NFTs, non-fungible tokens. Non-fungible means unique in its simplest form. So things like a lease is non-fungible. A land title is non-fungible. In this case, a land title is not the real asset, it's a representation of a physical asset, but it's still unique. And then, obviously, NFT, artworks, gaming, and an area which is really going to evolve is around KYC and identity. If you've identified someone and you've created a token, why can't you share that token between others in the industry? If someone's entered your building and you've authenticated them, why can't you use that same token to authenticate them into another building? And the last area is the fungible side. So fungible being interchangeable, things like central bank digital currencies, stable coins, and utility coins.